I come out of Bristol in different moods depending on what I've seen and who I've spoken to. I came out of this one feeling pretty positive, if I'm honest. I liked the new product that I saw. I liked the people that I saw looking at the new product, and I felt reasonably optimistic.
Welcome back to the channel. I'm Phil Hinton, the site editor, and I'm joined by hi-fi editor Ed Selley. Ed, welcome along. And we are going to talk about the Bristol Hi-Fi Show. So, Ed, once again, it's one of those events. I think it's 30-something years now.
Yes,
this show has been
too
running.
many, too many.
So it's one of those where obviously it's been running for such a long time that there is the possibility of a little bit of fatigue around these shows where it's the same venue, it's the same thing year on year. So maybe you could give us your thoughts on how things were in general this year in terms of people turning up, in terms of footfall, and more importantly, who was actually there and showing off product. Because one of the criticisms in the past is it's only people or brands that are sold through Audio T who are the show organizer.
Let's be clear, Audio T are the people that organise the show. And for that reason, if you're looking to see certain companies, they aren't going to turn up. It's not the case that every single company there sells through Audio T, but some companies make a considered decision that it's not one that they're going to pursue. It's also important to stress that certain companies come and go through this. It depends where they are in their product release cycle and what they have doing at the time. So, for example, last year, Henley Audio, they of Project and Wim and Musical Fidelity and other companies, didn't attend the show in any capacity. This year, they did. They didn't take their open plan booth. They took 3 rooms on one of the upper floors. So essentially, even though the show is very much in the same place doing the same thing, it evolves constantly. You have different people making use of different spaces in the hotel depending on what their priorities are. So last year, one of the largest suites in the entire building was being used by Lynn to show a fairly cost no object system. This year it was being used by Rel to show an entirely cost no object system. So certain things are absolutely consistent. You will find, I mean, for as long as I've been going, you'll have found Wilson Benesch, who do not sell an Audio T, incidentally, in a particular room at the end of the bar area. And other companies are just as big / superstitious about taking given rooms. But others just move around depending on how much they have to show and what they want to do with it at the time. Bristol is, with the best will in the world, and I do mean this in a positive way, an anomaly. It is, if we're being blunt, as you just said, I mean, it's Audio T, it's a regional trade show. And, judged by that, a regional trade show, it shouldn't be a significant launch event. But for reasons best known to itself, it has been for years and years and years. This year was no exception. We'll cover that in a moment. But what it means is, even if you aren't necessarily planning on purchasing a product this year from Audio T, there can be very compelling reasons to go along to Bristol because it's the first time that you will get eyes on a number of things. Often it's first, well, the nature of the calendar means it's first UK showing for a number of things. But more often than not, there's actually things doing their worldwide release there as well. So it punches above its weight, and it's long punched above its weight. And this can be, you can make the same criticisms you can every single year. I mean, I'm been doing them since 2003. There were people there who have been doing them for longer than that. It is even judged by the standards of shows in hotels, of which there are fewer than there used to be. The Marriott is an odd hotel, although, Phil, you'll never guess, we were treated to new carpets this year.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And that, I don't recall them changing. They must have changed since 2003 prior to this point, but I can't for the life of me remember when. So new carpets all round. So that was very exciting. It's still a very strange building. But the more established and experienced show practitioners there can often tease some quite decent results out of those rooms. So all of those things, it's one of those things. It's an acquired taste of a show, but I don't think it's that hard a taste to acquire. In specific reference to 2025, you asked about footfall. Footfall is a game of two halves. In so much as Friday, where the weather was absolutely dreadful, attendance was exceptionally good, especially considering it's a Friday and many people have jobs. Saturday and Sunday were both sunny and saw major rugby matches. And Bristol is perhaps not as keen a rugby part of the world as some parts of the Midlands, but nevertheless, it does have a decent rugby team, and there's plenty of people interested in it. So footfall, especially in the afternoons on the Saturday and Sunday, was quite a lot less than it was on the Friday. But thus far, I mean, people I've spoken to seemed reasonably happy with how things went. And one of the facets, other judges of productivity for Bristol, because it's hosted by Audio T, if your product is sold through Audio T, you can sell product through it. People who were selling products seemed quite happy with how it went. So make of that what you will. And it certainly felt relatively congested on the Friday whilst I was trying to do photos and so on and so forth. So, I mean, the plural of anecdote is not data, but I would say Friday was extremely well attended, down on the Saturday and Sunday, but nobody seems to be pressing alarm bells over that.
Okay. Well, one of the issues that seems to come up every year, Ed, and one of the comments seems to come is the rooms and the types of rooms.
Yeah.
And obviously you have the big spaces which tend to do well and have the big brands in them, but the smaller rooms, going by my experience, which I haven't been to the show in probably about 12 or 14 years. It's been a long time since I was last there. But I understand it hasn't changed that much, and the
No.
rooms can be a little bit difficult to get A, people in, and B,
Yes.
sound good.
Yes, no, there's two separate issues with the rooms. The first is if you just stick your head round the door, there is a narrow aperture corridor past the ensuite bathroom of the room. And that tends to have some very strange nodal effects. So if you listen to a room from that point there, almost everything will sound like garbage. The rooms do not take kindly to overdriving. By far and away the most successful rooms at the show were predominantly smaller speakers, but there are other speaker designs which are designed to work in relatively confined spaces. So there's a socking great pair of tannoys and a socking great pair of Lockwood speakers running at the show, both of which are designed to be relatively close to boundaries and fairly forgiving in that regard. And they were both sounding perfectly decent. It doesn't follow that the speaker has to be small, but it has to be content in a small space. Now, since the show calendar in the UK has changed a bit, so in only a couple of weeks' time, we've got the Audio Deluxe show at Whittleby Hall. There's a Hi-Fi News show later on in the year. Both of these are in larger spaces, and if you are a high-end manufacturer and you have a pair of loudspeakers that weigh as much as a small car, that's where you take them. Bristol, where you might be looking to sell product, and you've got these rooms that we've been talking about, you shouldn't be taking extremely large, extremely complicated things unless you have, as you say, one of the lower suites. And even then, they're not absolutely outstanding in this regard. Most rooms that I went into, not all, but most, were playing to the limitations of the space. I mean, as I say, one of the upsides of doing the same show in the same place for so many years, it's not going to come as a surprise what the rooms do. So people who knew what they were doing were getting more than respectable performance. I mean, just a case in point, one of my favorite sounding rooms, it didn't make it into the show report because there was nothing technically new in there. Graham Audio, the speaker manufacturer, Auralic and Sugden had combined forces for a room, and it wasn't a particularly large pair of loudspeakers, a sort of classic BBC pattern set of stand mounts with an 8-inch driver. It could be driven hard without running into the limitations of the system, but it then wasn't overloading the room. It just sounded fundamentally right. And it was, there were a number of sort of rooms running at that sort of pattern of equipment, and they were all sounding more than halfway decent. Equally, one or two people, yes, had brought something oversized along, and it wasn't quite so happy. So some people are still learning lessons that other people have learned.
Yeah. Right. So let's get into some of the standout products then.
Mm.
What did catch your eye this year? And I believe most of these will be in the show report.
Yes, absolutely. The thing that caught my eye before we do specific products was a couple of things. The first is one, there is a surprising amount of new product out there. Now, obviously, we're dealing with stuff developed prior to the current international fun and games, but there is nevertheless a degree of confidence that things are going to continue in with some degree of success. But the products that debuted at Bristol, for the most part, didn't have telephone number price tags on them. And I found that quite heartening as well. If you aren't shopping with an enormous budget, there's some good stuff coming this year. I mean, in terms of quite a lot of this. Henley Audio, as I say, had skipped last year's show but came back to do this year's one. They focused on affordable stuff. So Henley represents, amongst other brands, Wim, Project, and Musical Fidelity. So each of those companies was issued a room. Wim had their new amp, the name of which escapes me. You'll have to bear with me on this. It's an unusual piece of equipment because it's the first Wim product that has made an appearance that does not have any form of streaming on board. It is designed, the Vibe Link amp, sorry, there we go, is designed to complement existing Wim streamers. It's a styling match for the Wim Ultra streamer, and it, whatever final calculations you make about sonic performance, it costs 320 quid, which is, that's sensible money, let's be honest here. If you want to spend a little bit more than that, Musical Fidelity with the B series, this is a much more classic shaped and sort of styled piece of hi-fi equipment, but nevertheless the integrated amp has got niceties like digital inputs, HDMI ARC, etc. The CD player, interestingly, we've had lots of comments on recent CD reviews that you lot really don't like inhaler drives. The CD for the the CD for the B series is £600, so it's going to be a bit more than some of the CDs that we've looked at, but it has a proper tray type drive, and I know that some people are going to be absolutely delighted by that. Then Project, they debuted, no pun intended, the colourful system from last year. No, not even last year, the year before that. They've updated those, and there's now two of them. So there's a relatively keenly priced one. Oh dear, that's just gone bananas. At £1,099, turntable amp speakers, and the amp's got some digital inputs as well to cover you there. And then a more elaborate successor to the beautiful system that we've already reviewed, which is 1799. Now, obviously, £1,800 is still a lot of money, but in the scheme of some of the stuff that we've looked at and been sent press releases for recently, this is all very keenly priced. And then it just continued in that vein. Riga have the new Brio due out imminently. Prices crept up on that to £800, but it's built in the UK. It's the first Riga Brio to have digital inputs. It's also the first Riga anything to have standby, which is a big deal for the company. Neat, they were demonstrating speakers at £5,000, £7,000, but they've also got a new version of the Iota, one of the earliest things I ever reviewed for AVForums, which will be a whisker over £1,000. And it continues in that vein. Fine Audio have been bolstering their more expensive end of the market. They've gone back to the lower end of it with the F500 series of speakers. Again, not absolute bargain basement, going from about £600 to £1,800, but bespoke, sounded excellent, genuinely impressive engineering. Acoustic Energy were there with new 300s. They range between, I think, £400 and £1,800. And you just got the feeling that, for a long time, the lower end of the market it's been receiving new products, but they sort of trickle in and they just essentially just keep it ticking over. There's a lot more effort on winning customers for the first time now, because those are the people that you hopefully retain long enough to sell some of them your more expensive and more profitable equipment. I mean, there were obviously more expensive items. There's a new Cyrus phono stage coming. There's a new Michelle phono stage coming, which is a new Michelle product, which is genuinely exciting. And the prices start increasing from there. So the Cyrus is 2,200, the Michelle's 3,000. There's a new exposure amp at 5,000. There was a new pair of quad electrostatics at 12,000. So it's not all bargain basement, but it was, for the most part, most of the things there was at least a nod towards attainable. And I thought that that was genuinely appealing. The other thing that's quite interesting, before I finish, take a breath, all too often in recent shows, I say recent shows in years gone by, you'd be shown something and it would be very exciting. I'd write about it in the report. It's like, when am I actually going to see a review version of this? Oh, we've got a while yet. We've cobbled this one together and we've got months more development to do. Almost everything that featured in the show report, I'm sure that one of these products will, for reasons unforeseen, be significantly delayed, but almost everything in that show report I'm supposed to see in the front half of this year. And I do not remember that happening for a very long time. What we're being shown by manufacturers is stuff almost ready to go. We're not being teased with vaporware.
Yeah, no, that is unusual because, like you say, um, just over the last few years, and obviously since the event,
Yeah.
things have taken a little while to come through in product development and parts and all that kind of thing. So it
Mm.
looks like we're well over that now, and
Well, hopefully,
things,
yes.
things are turning up quickly. Any trends that you noticed this year? I mean, obviously, we've spoken about the show report there, and obviously that's on the AVForums website. You can go and look at that and see all the images that Ed's just been talking about there for all the products. But was there any noticeable or obvious trends that you noticed this year, Ed?
Yes, there's two that stand out. The first is, even when something is not a one box system, the nature of how it's being marketed, sold, and supported with other pieces of equipment, manufacturers are really pushing a much greater homogenized, we would like you to buy everything type of approach to making product. If you are a manufacturer of one type of product, that's going to be more interesting for you. I mean, when you see those project systems where everything comes in the box and they're good to go, you get separate style flexibility, but there's no, oh, will this work with this, and so on and so forth. Riga's been pushing that approach with the System One, and obviously, they make complete systems. That Michelle phono stage turning up, you get the feeling that it's now, if you choose to buy a Michelle turntable, you can buy cartridge arm turntable phono stage, and it's all going to hang together. If you want, the manufacturer can supply it in a sort of pre-built state. And this is going to become, it's going to become one of those things where, yes, you can use this equipment in systems where you've chosen every single component yourself because it's just so, and the dynamic relationship with them is exactly what you need in your space. But the vast majority of people aren't going to do that. We're looking at, I think, a move towards even systems that are comprised of multiple boxes. Those multiple boxes come from one manufacturer. Within that as well, the other thing that's sort of really becoming apparent is that convenience has won, and I'm very positive about this. You're looking at products where HDMI ARC is routinely fitted and it generally works and it does what it's supposed to do. They are littered with features which just makes them easier to use day to day. They do the things that you want to do. They're not that you don't have to add extra bits to get certain functionality and so on and so forth. We have a couple of manufacturers will continue to make hay over building exceptionally minimalist product, but everyone else has come to terms with the fact that you can put extra features on something and it doesn't affect how it sounds. And just the end result is more user friendly, more convenient, more flexible, and more appealing. And I'm very glad that we've learnt this lesson. And I'm very glad that we've learnt it prior to becoming extinct.
Do you think it's a generational thing? Do you think that there are younger consumers now
Yeah.
coming through and
And they were
demanding
there. I'm
things?
going to
Yeah.
hesitate to describe the people there as young. I mean, there were people who I would describe as young, but there were still relatively small numbers of those. But the actual age groups of people there there were fewer out and out old people and people who were more comfortably into early and standard middle age. And yeah, essentially, we've had this conversation across a number of podcasts. If you are coming at this from an AV background, coming at this from a soundbar background, or you're just coming at this from you've used other modern consumer electronics, some of the implacable minimalism of two-channel audio is just going to seem parochial and inexplicable. And a number of manufacturers have gone, do you know what? You're right. And you want to mess about with the tone controls, EQ curves, all the rest of it, you can go nuts. You can do that. You want to connect your television to it, please do. This is the socket for it. You want AirPlay, Bluetooth, Chromecast, yep, not a problem. And it doesn't matter that the product is notionally a high-end one. You can fit AirPlay. It doesn't have any effect on the actual baseline performance of the unit. It's got AirPlay. We are in a situation now where you have to really want minimalism for it to be, it's not something that's thrust upon you whether you like it or not. In the time I started this, tone controls were relatively unheard of. And now, to be honest, the market is accepting of the fact contrary to what a number of people who comment on reviews might say, at the moment, the public is not demanding Dirac and EQ functionality, but they are comfortable with it being present for them to experiment with if they see fit. If that continues to evolve, that continues to evolve. But we're making progress to people not discounting something because it just does more than the one thing that they were looking for it to do.
And you see that across a lot of products, so not just hi-fi, but it's an interesting point that you made there about Dirac. We're seeing, I've certainly saw it in the last 2 years with TVs. You now set a TV up, and with some manufacturers, it will say audio setup, have the remote control at ear height, press this button, and
Yeah.
it does an auto EQ from your listening position nowadays. This technology is just being used by more and more people. People are getting comfortable with it now.
Yeah.
They're expecting it on a lot of products. So we're not talking about just AVForums core hi-fi users here. We're talking about the much wider marketplace where people really are starting to realize this. And it's one thing that hasn't disappeared. And it's interesting hearing what you're saying about footfall at Bristol and so on, is that there is more interest, I would say, now in high quality music and music listening in the home than probably in the last 20 years. And it seems to come in waves. But we seem to be on a wave at the minute where more and more people are, because of the whole lifestyle thing, because of smart speakers and everything else, and you can join speakers up in different rooms and have multi-room systems and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
People then want to listen to things on it, and again, we were seeing an uptick in that, and a real change in the demographic, I would say.
Yes, and not before time, fundamentally. And I had my concerns in years gone that there would be an element of struggling to adapt, and there isn't. For the most part, most companies have gone, do you know what? That's what you want, you can have it. And dying on principle doesn't seem to be something that's big in at the moment, and I'm perfectly comfortable with that. So yeah, it was I'd come out of Bristol in different moods depending on what I've seen and who I've spoken to. I came out of this one feeling pretty positive, if I'm honest. I liked the new product that I saw. I liked the people that I saw looking at the new product, and I felt reasonably optimistic. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very hard to separate the ongoing, this is not a politics podcast, so I'm just going to say the ongoing international fun and games is going to affect the industry in the way that it's going to affect everything else. And we don't know, you can't aim off for that because it's completely unknown. I do get the feeling that most companies have chosen pragmatic paths about getting new people through the door, and I'm hoping that pragmatism is going to be the way forward in this instance. And Bristol showed a degree of optimistic pragmatism, and I like that.
Excellent. So if you went to the Bristol show this weekend and you want to add to the comments below on this video on YouTube, then you can do. Let us know what you saw, what your picks of the show were and so on. Or if you just like hi-fi shows in general, if you give us feedback, are there enough hi-fi shows in the UK or the US? You know, do you get an opportunity to go to a dealership and listen to this stuff, or do you want to have more of these types of shows where you can go along and listen to what's new and find out new products and so on? Let us know in the comments. You can also do that if you're listening to the podcast version in the podcast thread. But that's it for this video. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the channel and do like this video, and we'll catch you in the next one.